Hello, everybody, and welcome to Grimwit with Dimwits. I'm T.
And I'm Blondie. And I am totally not going to ask you how you're doing because I know you are super duper busy.
Thank you. Because yes, I'm even too busy to answer that question. It's the weekend before we go on vacation, and I still have a million things to do.
And you want me to feel sorry for you how?
I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I just want you to...
Not going to happen. Don't even throw an adjective out there. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, she already knows my brain is not working today, so I just need to stop talking as much as possible.
It's extra today.
It's so extra. How many takes did it take us to get this far?
We're on take number 1. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, I know. We're perfect. Anywho.
They all know better.
So this week, we're going to do a couple of more shout outs. First shout out is going to be to Winnipeg, Canada. We have a lot of great memories in Canada, don't we?
Great memories getting kicked out of Canada.
But at least they were nice about it.
Oh, yeah, no. When he's saying, just go, just go.
Just get the hell out of our country.
That's right.
That's a story for another time.
Complete other time. And I'm going to do a shout out to the villages in Florida. Now, I looked up this little town or community, but it is so quaint and cute.
Is it?
It's really cute.
Is it like a little beach town?
It's kind of like in the middle of the state.
Uh-huh.
Middle and up. I saw pictures. It's real quaint.
Middle and up.
You go to the middle and go up a little bit.
Yeah, everybody knows what that is. Go middle and up of Florida. You know where it is.
Right.
Hello.
Okay, crazy.
So speaking of Florida, we have a little more crazy in Florida. We promised you guys an update on the Wade Wilson case. So a couple of days ago, Mr. Wade Wilson, if you guys are not familiar with Wade Wilson, we did an episode on him. It's called A Face You Can't Erase. The Deadpool Killer, Wade Wilson. It's a couple of episodes back. So if you want to hear that, it's there for you. And we gave all the information about it, about his crimes. And he's a horrible person. I don't even want to call him a person. He's not human. But he received a death sentence for each of the murders that he committed. He killed 2 women and he received 1 death sentence for each one.
I'd like to see them do that, actually.
I'd love to see them do that. I hope they follow through. And it was really kind of sad. I was looking it up, and Diane Ruiz's father, she's one of Wade Wilson's victims. Her father's name is Felix Ruiz. And he said, quote, "This is not the end. The end is when the accused takes his last breath, and I will be there at the execution. That's a promise." End quote.
Wow. He's putting it out there.
He really is. And so I hope Florida follows through. And I hope Wade Wilson gets what he has coming to him. He's only 30 years old. I don't think we need to support his killer ass for the next 50 or 60 years. He's not worth it.
Not at all. And I think Florida is actually really good about their death penalty. I do believe they do their executions within 14 years because they have to let them do all their appeals and stuff. But how are we going to appeal this guy?
Yeah, everybody has that right. But I just really hope that this father gets to see this happen. I mean, he needs some type of justice in his lifetime.
Me too.
All right. So what's our story about this week, Blondie?
So this is a story that most of us have heard of and know about. The media frenzy over this was huge. The public was literally obsessed. And I have to admit that I read many articles on Scott and Laci Peterson.
Ooh, that's a good one. I was following that story too for a while because it was just so tragic.
It was awful. So Scott Peterson has been in jail for 20 years so far. But what's happening now is the LA Innocence Project is taking over his case. Scott also did his first on-camera Zoom interview since he was arrested. He did do a few interviews before he was arrested, but nothing after. And this Zoom interview is an account of what happened on December 24th, 2002, when Laci disappeared, and all the events that have transpired after, including the trial and everything to date. We'll be going over Scott's responses then and now, the details, and sharing all the theories and speculations.
Wow, that's a pretty big statement because there must be a gazillion theories. So all might be a pretty strong word.
You're right. There are a gazillion, but we'll be focusing on the ones that make a little more sense in this 2-part episode.
Okay, I'm with you on that.
You have 2 compelling stories, both circumstantial. If you think Scott Peterson is guilty, there's a heap of evidence on your side. But if you think Scott Peterson is innocent, there's some interesting evidence on your side. The problem is, it's not black and white.
They never are.
So here we go with part 1. Let's get our grim on. Christmas Eve 2002, Scott and Laci start their morning like they do every day, watching Martha Stewart, Laci's favorite show, and sharing a bowl of cereal, eating it out of one bowl. According to Scott, they used one bowl because they were lazy and didn't want to wash 2 bowls.
Okay, that's disgusting.
I'm not going to go there. I'll let that one go.
Yeah, just you can't clean it up. It's gross.
Scott was debating between playing golf or taking his new fishing boat, the one he bought on December 9th, out for its maiden voyage. He decided to take his boat out because it was too cold to golf. Laci, being 8.5 months pregnant, stayed home.
So just knowing a little bit about this from all those years ago, I've always been curious as to why he thought it would be okay to leave his extremely pregnant wife at home all alone. I mean, this is right at the time that you should be home and available because the baby could come at any moment. And it's Christmas Eve, dude. I mean, who does that?
Phone calls show that Scott left about 10 a.m. that morning. He went to his warehouse, loaded the boat, and drove to Berkeley in San Francisco Bay Area, 90 miles from their home. He launched his boat and came up on Brooks Island, where he noticed the sign that said no landing. He was in the water for about an hour to an hour and a half. He packed everything up and headed home about 2:15 p.m.
Okay, so 90 miles. Come on now. That's way too far when Laci is that pregnant. And my hubby fishes all the time locally, and he's never gone for just an hour or an hour and a half. Never. It's a half day, all day thing. Why would he drive a couple of hours away each way for an hour and a half of fishing? That makes no sense.
That's where he went, although I did hear something about they did have a reservoir 10 miles away, but he wanted to go to Berkeley apparently.
Yeah.
On his way home, he called Laci to tell her he was leaving and that he wouldn't be able to stop off at Della Farms to pick up a basket for Papa, but he would see her in a little while and that he loved her.
So did their phone records show that Laci answered his call and they had a conversation?
All I heard was that he left a message.
That's very convenient.
When Scott arrived home, Laci was not there. He wasn't that concerned. He just thought that maybe she was with some friends or at her mom's house preparing for Christmas Eve dinner. He hopped in the shower, changed his clothes, and called her mother's house to see if Laci was there. She wasn't, and he started to get concerned. The police are called to report her missing. A search is started in the neighborhood, and the police check with all the neighbors to see if they had seen Laci. They go to Scott and Laci's next-door neighbor named Karen to see if she'd seen Laci. She hadn't, but that morning she saw their dog, a golden retriever named Mackenzie, running outside the gate with its leash on. She walked over and put the dog back in the yard and then left because she had errands to run. I love neighbors that watch out for you. We live in that kind of area, community.
I love that too. Do you know how long he waited to report her missing?
I would assume the same day. I do know Scott and Laci's stepfather both filed reports.
I'm pretty sure it had to be the same day because I think by that night or maybe the next morning it was already out. But I just wondered if he waited an hour or 2 hours. Like, did he jump the gun a little bit? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know exactly when he called. Friends and family are also looking for Laci, and by Christmas morning, the police had issued a press release that Laci was missing. This is where things really start to take off. Scott's sister-in-law's stepmother worked in public relations and offered to send the press release out by wire to news agencies, which she did. Quickly, Laci's disappearance was covered by national news. It was everywhere. They were reporting about Laci Peterson, who was 8 months pregnant and had disappeared on Christmas Eve. The national media had literally taken the story and just went to town. In front of Scott and Laci's house, the entire street was filled with members of the media and satellite trucks from across the country.
I remember this hitting the news really hard, and it was all people talked about for quite a while.
There were searches everywhere in helicopters, boats, and even teams on horseback. They also checked alleys, garages, and backyards. Everyone wanted her home safe. Because she was pregnant, she was considered a high-risk missing person under suspicious circumstances. One of the theories was that she was abducted for her baby. As in a lot of cases, Scott Peterson was the person they were looking at first. They didn't call him a suspect, but they also didn't say that he wasn't. According to Scott, he said that they were focusing on him from the get-go. Scott denied from day one that he had anything to do with her disappearance. Part of their suspicions was that he acted strange and wasn't crying during all of this. Quote, "They're saying it's because I was unwilling for the first few weeks to go in front of a camera and give them the terrible emotions I was feeling," end quote, said Scott.
When he says they, does he mean the police or the media?
It was in general. He was acting weird and wasn't emotional. He's been around the police, media, and everyone that was looking for Laci. So I think it was just an in general statement about everyone or they.
Okay.
Tip lines were open for any information leading to Laci's whereabouts. About 850 tips came in. As they were going through them, they got a tip about a parolee, and they also looked into registered sex offenders in the area, but they were all cleared. I can only imagine how long it would take them to go through all those tips. That's got to be a job in itself.
Right. And I mean, they have to do a little bit of a thorough search on those people. So you're right. That would take forever.
The investigators wanted to get a closer look inside the Peterson home, hoping to find something that Laci may have been abducted or maybe she had a boyfriend. They wanted to look at her computer and search the cars and even Scott's shop. They gave him the search warrant and asked him to sign it. And his first response was, "You don't expect me to sign this without a lawyer." They explained that it was a search warrant, that they were going to do it anyway, and if he didn't have anything to hide, he would just let them in to do their job. They obtained fingerprints, fibers, but the search didn't show any damage in the house, no forced entry, no evidence of a bloody crime scene, or no stranger intrusion.
You know, hearing you say what he said, he's his own worst enemy, saying that he wouldn't agree to a search without a lawyer. Nobody would ever do that if they had nothing to hide. I'd be like, search every inch if it might help us find her. Wouldn't you?
I totally would. The only thing they did find was a drop of blood at the foot of the bed that ended up being Scott's, but ultimately, it didn't appear like anything violent had happened there. In Scott's Zoom interview, he said, quote, "They had this assumption, I think. It's called confirmation bias, where they only look at evidence which can support their bias, and that's what they did. They were told what they thought happened and what they wanted to find. They came into my house, not to look for Laci, but to look for evidence against me. They did a search of our house. There was absolutely no forensic evidence in the house. There's no blood, there's no struggle, there's nothing like that. And that they continue to focus on me," end quote.
I could see how he might think that now, but in the moment, I'm sure it wasn't about him, conceded. It was about Laci and Connor.
And I thought it was strange that he said that they came in and they didn't look for Laci. Well,
Laci's
obviously she's not there.
Exactly. Come on now.
Think, dude. But an officer questioned Scott about fishing that day. He asked him what he was fishing for and what he used for bait. Scott paused, had a blank look on his face. His eyes were shifty. He hesitated before allegedly mumbling something. A few minutes later, he walked out the door, threw a flashlight on the ground, and said the F word really loud. He also told several other people that day that he'd been golfing. Come on, buddy, get your story straight.
Yeah, that's just a really dumb move, telling two different stories.
He's a little bit of a bonehead. They proceeded to do a search at Scott's warehouse, where there was a flatbed trailer that Scott used in his business. On this trailer, powdered rings and concrete residue were found. It looked like someone was making several different concrete anchors. There was only one anchor in the boat. The police noted that it looks like he may have made 5 anchors, but they only found the one. Scott's reaction was, quote, "There are reports that there's evidence I made 5 weights. I'm definitely disputing that because there's no evidence that that was even a weight. I made 1, end quote. Just to add some irony to this, Scott was a salesman for Trade Corp USA, a subsidiary of a European fertilizer company. Yes, the man was a fertilizer salesman, and apparently not a very good one because an auditor of his business said he couldn't turn a profit from it. I laughed.
Yeah, that's very appropriate because he was definitely trying to sell some crap to the world by saying that he's innocent. And I just caught the part where he says, I'm definitely disputing that because there's no evidence it was even a weight. I made 1. Well, there's your evidence.
Well, he said he only made 1.
But he's saying it wasn't even a weight. But then he says he made 1. It's like, if it's not a weight, how did you make 1?
I don't know.
Oh, this guy. Fertilizer salesman, for sure.
He's stinky.
Yeah.
They also found needle nose pliers in the bottom of the boat with a hair wrapped in it. One report said that it was Laci's hair, and another said that they couldn't determine if it was hers because they didn't have a donor sample. There were a couple of theories as to how the hair got there. One was that it came off Scott's clothing and got tangled in the pliers. The second was that he did make those anchors and wired them to her limbs to help submerge the body, and he needed those pliers to manipulate the wire.
Tangled hair in the pliers is not like finding it loose on the ground. Tangling takes some effort.
Exactly. Also on the boat, there was concrete residue along the inside edge, implying that if he were rolling a body off the boat with the anchors attached, the concrete would get on the inside and leave the residue.
Well, he just left a trail everywhere, didn't he?
Okay, well, Laci's body hasn't been found yet, so this is all just speculation so far.
I say it's evidence.
May turn into evidence, but now it's just speculation. Now here's where the bombshell, in more ways than one, comes in. On the tip line, they get a call from a woman who said Scott Peterson was her boyfriend, and she gave her name as Amber Fry. She heard about him on the news and that his wife was missing. This came out of nowhere because everybody thought Scott and Laci were a perfect couple. They had everything going for them. They were going to be parents, so this was just out of left field. Amber Fry told investigators how she met Scott. She had a friend that had gone to a conference in Anaheim, the same conference Scott was at. He was telling people he was single and wanting to let all the women know his intentions. He wrote, "horny bastard," on his name badge. Yeah, 'cause that would make me come running.
I bet it would. I know you.
Hey, I can hear you.
But you know what? That's way too ballsy for a married guy to do. Only a guy who wouldn't have a wife to worry about would be that stupid.
Amber's friend and Scott strike up a conversation. She finds him charming, polite, funny, and learns he lives in Modesto. She tells him, "I have a friend who lives in Fresno, and her name is Amber Fry. You guys might be good together." Unable to help himself, in November, Scott gets a hold of Amber. They meet in Fresno and start a big ol' romance. And I just want to say, some kind of friend is pimping her out because she knows what he wants.
Yeah. I mean, it says it right there on his name tag. But what I'm tripping out about is, so Amber was a referral? I mean, that's weird, right?
It is strange.
But she didn't even know Scott. She just barely met him and was already, like you said, pimping her friend out.
Here you go. the investigators go to Fresno to interview Amber. They ask if Scott still calls her, and she tells him yes, every day. One of the investigators went to Radio Shack and got a cassette recorder, and right after it was set up, like seconds later, the phone rings, and it's Scott. During their taped conversations, Scott is charming and romantic. He says things like he's been thinking about her, he has their picture in his pocket, and he takes it out and kisses it. He can still feel her in his arms. Blah.
Yeah, gross.
There was over 29 hours of conversation. Scott was lying to Amber as well, telling her that he's traveling for business and that he's going to places like Europe and Alaska. And I did hear one of the taped phone conversations. It sounded like he was in a helicopter. It was really strange.
We can get those sound effects online.
Very true. He also lied to the police in the beginning. He denied having an extramarital affair. But in a TV interview, he said he told the police immediately after Laci went missing.
You know, this guy sounds like he's definitely making the effort to appear single and ready for new love. And you know what? That speaks volumes.
After 29 hours of listening to him lying and being all mushy, they realized that they really weren't getting anything about what happened to Laci. So they decided to have Amber push things a little bit. On December 9th, the same day that he bought the boat, he told her he lost his wife. Amber called him out and said, quote, "I thought you said it was a tragedy that she was missing and this is going to be their first Christmas without her," end quote. He said, "I never said I lost my wife." She said, quote, "Yes, you did. How do you lose her before she's lost?" End quote. His response was that there were different ways to be lost. Does he just make stuff up as he goes along?
Apparently he does. And he's not very good at it. And the timing on that is no coincidence. Because, he finally bought the boat, which he knew he would use to get rid of the body. So now he was free to go forward with the "I lost my wife" story. Because he knew she was going to be gone soon. And it's funny because this is the one thing he didn't lie about. This was going to be his first Christmas without her.
I think you have a very good point there. One of the investigators said, quote, "With Amber coming forward, I felt like we had a motive. He just didn't want to be part of this domestic life. He didn't want to be a father, didn't want to pay child support, and he just wanted out of it to just start enjoying life in a different direction." Scott met Amber on November 20th, and December 9th, he buys the boat. Then we find out he's searching the tides of San Francisco Bay, end quote. Another theory forms based on the fact that Scott's looking up the tides in San Francisco Bay and a possible place to dump Laci. He bought the boat, and remember he said he decided to go fishing that morning? Well, he actually already bought a fishing license for December 23rd and December 24th, but gave them the impression that he just decided to go that morning. Now that's a little suspicious. He said he couldn't decide whether to go golfing or fishing, but spur of the moment decided to go fishing because it's too cold to go golfing. It's a little bit hinky if you ask me.
Wouldn't it be colder to go fishing?
I was thinking the same thing.
And he only wanted to fish for the 2 days in his brand new boat. That's it. He just bought 2 days worth of fishing license. So he planned those 2 days ahead of time. Come on, Scott. This is too obvious.
He could actually use that as an alibi. It's like his wife was about ready to give birth, so he only had 2 days. He was going to spend the rest of the time with her.
Well, that's true, but he didn't because he's not that smart.
I just thought of that myself right now.
Right?
But then how did he do it? Did he kill her that morning on December 24th? Wrap her in something, drag her through the house, load her into his truck, and covered her with the patio umbrellas that they found in the bed of his truck? Went to the warehouse to get the boat, drove 90 miles to the marina, and dumped her in the water with those concrete anchors? So to get a perspective, Laci was only 5'1" and thin before she got pregnant. So even at 8.5 months, I can't imagine that she was that big.
No, I'm sure she wasn't. And my opinion is you just described exactly how he did it, because that makes total sense to me.
I think it made sense to everyone else as well. To help his alibi, he made that phone call to Laci telling her that he was on his way back. He got home, washed his wet clothes. He did tell the police that they were wet because he got caught in some rain. Then he took the shower, ate some pizza, and then he called Laci's mom. This was their working theory.
And he sounds so nonchalant about the day, you know? It's really disturbing.
During the Zoom call, the interviewer commented to Scott that they were saying he killed Laci because he didn't want to be married or be a father. Scott's response, quote, "That's so offensive. It's so disgusting. I just don't get that argument. It's just absolutely not true. I certainly regret cheating on Laci, absolutely. It was about childish lack of self-esteem, selfish being, traveling, somewhere being lonely that night because I wasn't at home. You know, someone makes you feel good because they want to have sex with you," end quote. He's absolutely right. That is offensive. He was away from what I can gather. It sounds like one night. He couldn't hang one night, but then doesn't do anything till a month later with someone who wasn't even at the conference. He's right again. Disgusting.
And let's not forget that Mr. I'm so offended was wearing his horny bastard badge proudly. So how in the hell is that guy lacking any self-esteem? That also makes no sense, Scott.
She also asked Scott why he kept talking to Amber after Laci disappeared, and he said that he wanted the search for his family to continue. So he thought, okay, I'll stay in contact with her so she doesn't get upset and doesn't out me. His justification was that if anyone found out about Amber, that would be his motivation, and the search would stop for Laci. Scott says, quote, "The search for Laci's going to stop as soon as the police officers or the public know that I was having sex with another woman. The knowledge of her was a time bomb," end quote. A seriously demented form of justification, if you ask me. And he just called himself out. He said he told the police immediately once Laci was missing.
He just can't keep his story straight. Oh, what a tangled web we weave.
When the news about Amber Fry came out, the families were at odds. They didn't know this Scott. Plus, he was not cooperating as much as he could have been. Since the news broke about Amber, the Modesto Police Department were fully on board with the fact that Scott did this. So Scott and his family hired a private investigator to help find Laci and determine what happened to her. A timeline is started for December 24th. Scott left shortly after 10 a.m. I believe it was more like 10:08. And with the evidence from the neighbor who put the dog in the backyard, that was around 10:18. They believe that if anyone saw Laci after the time Scott left, he would be innocent.
But did anyone actually see her?
The private investigator starts talking to witnesses. A couple said that they left their house, got gas, were delivering presents, and they saw a young lady that was very pregnant. She had a golden retriever with her that she was struggling with, and the husband asked the wife if he had seen the pregnant lady, and he hoped she didn't fall. Another neighbor said that it was between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. that she was in her kitchen looking out the window while washing some dishes. She noticed a pregnant woman walking to the park with a beautiful golden retriever. The next witness said she saw her by the park. The woman had just gotten to work, and she saw a very pregnant woman walking her dog. It was about 10:45 in the morning because she went outside to have her morning cigarette before she started her shift. The concern was that the police weren't taking these sightings seriously, that they were just focusing on Scott, that they never came to talk to them.
So how could they verify if it was actually her? I mean, even if they had spoken to these people.
Good question. The police said that they interviewed witnesses and their accounts were subjective. They further said it would be very easy for people to say they saw Laci to be helpful and later say they were mistaken. When watching the interview, they had a few witnesses on there, and the one thing that they all said was that she was wearing a white shirt and black pants. But the problem with that was in the press release. So the police are following up on these 850 tips and checking them off as being credible one at a time.
We know by doing this podcast that people always say they see things, and it's most of the time they're not correct.
And if it's anything close, they could say, oh yeah, I saw that, you know.
Mm-hmm. They just want to be part of it.
Scott said, quote, "So I wasn't the last one to see Laci that day. There's so many credible witnesses who saw her walking in our neighborhood. I recently learned that in one of the reports, the person came down and talked to the police at their command center, and the police said, 'No, you're wrong, you didn't see her.' Just dismissed him without even looking into it. That's devastating to learn, that kind of stuff," end quote. That sounds very conspiracy theory-like.
It does, but like we just said, people always think they see missing people, so I'm not sold yet.
It's been over a month since Laci's disappearance. At a press conference, Amber Frey comes up to the podium and said how very sorry she was to Laci's family and the pain that this has caused them. Just as Scott had predicted, the focus was now on her and him. With all the shocking news, people were starting to wonder if he could lie about his affair, that there's other things he could probably lie about. What else was he hiding? I remember the Laci and Scott Peterson story was literally a daily thing on the news. And I used to get People magazine. There were articles all the time in there about this.
Yeah, I know. It was everywhere. It was a huge story.
Realizing that everyone thinks he's guilty, Scott decided to do some interviews. He had an interview with Diane Sawyer where she asked the basic question, "Did you murder your wife?" His response, quote, No, I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance," end quote. He also claimed that he told Laci about the affair and that she was okay with it. Diane asked him if she was angry, and he said no. Quote, "Do you really expect people to believe that an 8.5-month pregnant woman learns her husband has an affair and makes peace with it?" End quote, says Diane Sawyer. He replies, quote, "Well, no one knows our relationship but us," end quote. Could he form a sentence without being evasive?
Then why didn't he tell the police about Amber right away, since he wasn't doing anything wrong? And why would he have to tell Amber he lost his wife if Laci was totally cool with it? Scott really doesn't think these things through.
It seems like he's telling everyone whatever story makes sense at the time.
And even that doesn't make sense.
During another interview, he was asked if he had taken the lie detector test. He replied, and I quote, "Well, the polygraph is another one of those things. I'm not saying I have. I'm not saying I haven't."
Maybe he should have answered that question with a polygraph. I can't stand this guy.
The hits keep on coming. Another interviewer questioned Scott about Amber's claim that you called her on December 24th and said that you were going to Brussels. Quote, "Yeah, this is a short newscast. I don't know how much of these words you're going to use or not. I'm not going to waste that by defending myself, talking about irrelevant things," end quote, says Scott. He really wasn't helping himself at all. He was coming across as being disingenuous and outright lying. Someone even said that he shot himself in the foot so much that he should be on crutches. I thought that was funny, but he really did give that arrogant, narcissistic vibe.
Oh, 100%. He was a total narcissist.
He did a total of 4 interviews before he was arrested. They still haven't found Laci, and as the search continues in the San Francisco Bay Area, there have been 17 divers on boats that swept the water outside the marina. They also focused on Brooks Island, which is the island he said he went to and saw the sign "No Landing." Searchers were in the water every day with numerous boats, helicopters, and multiple cadaver dogs. Over 500 searches were completed. The one thing that did come up was that at the boat ramp in Berkeley, a canine did pick up Laci's scent.
And there's only one way her scent got there, because this was a brand new boat, right? And she had supposedly never been in it. But her body was there. So Scott didn't think of everything, apparently. How could he explain that?
I have no words. They were also asked to search for homemade devices or anchors, anything that would have kept a body underwater. 2 homemade anchors were found. They looked like they could be the size of a paint can or a large coffee can, but they were determined not to be connected to Laci Peterson's disappearance and were thrown back in the bay. This next part, we will be giving details about baby Connor And if you prefer not to hear them, please fast forward about a minute and catch up with us. On April 13th, 2003, the decomposed body of a baby with its umbilical cord still attached washed ashore at Point Isabel. It was about a mile from where Peterson told police he was fishing the day his wife vanished. On April 14th, 2003, the remains of a woman lying face down was found in the same area. The body was missing her head and 3 limbs. She had strips of duct tape wrapped around her. The autopsies later determined that it was Laci and Connor Peterson. The forensic pathologist reported that she was still pregnant at the time of her death and was not dismembered. It was likely that her body had broken apart due to the marine environment because her arms and legs were probably anchored. Connor was separated from Laci's body after months underwater and decomposition. Connor's umbilical cord was torn, not cut or clamped. Quote, "It does tell us that the baby was in the womb for many months after Laci was in the water, and Laci in fact protected the baby until the baby came out shortly before the bodies were found," end quote, said forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden. The pathologist was unable to determine the cause of Laci's death.
No way in a million years this happens without Scott putting them in the water. No way. You know, they're found a mile from where Scott was in the water the day they went missing. Again, absolutely no other way. Their cause of death was Scott Peterson. Plain and simple.
Do you have an opinion?
Definitely.
After the bodies were found, a team of officers were in charge of keeping an eye on Scott while waiting for the DNA results. The next day, Scott was up and moving very early. He was headed to Torrey Pines Golf Course to play golf with his dad and brother. He saw cars following him. He figured it was tabloid reporters, so he evaded them. He was driving pretty erratically, braking suddenly, and cutting in and out of traffic, so the police decided that before he hurt someone, they were going to arrest him.
So you said this was right after the bodies were found. So he gets "We think we found your wife and baby." And he says, "Awesome, thanks. I think I'm going to go golfing now." What the hell?
Once he reached the entrance of the golf course, Scott got out of the car. He didn't put up a fight, but wanted to know why they were arresting him, and why weren't you guys out looking for the killer? That statement I found a little perplexing, because if they just found the bodies and they're just assuming that it's Laci and Connor, but it isn't confirmed, why would he say, "Why aren't you out looking for the killer?"
Because he's dumb.
Scott had dyed his hair kind of blonde and had grown a goatee. The assumption was that he was trying to disguise himself a little bit from the paparazzi. They went through his car and found knives, 4 cell phones, things you need to go camping, $10,000 to $15,000 in cash, his brother's driver's license, and Viagra. Since Torrey Pines Golf Course was located in San Diego, it appeared that he was headed to Mexico. Now, the story about the money, Scott's sister-in-law said that his brother wanted to buy Scott's truck, so he gave Scott the cash for it, that he must have still been carrying it around when he was arrested. Why would you carry thousands of dollars of cash if you're going to go golfing for the day?
Screw the cash. What's up with the Viagra? That's what I want to know. Why do you need that to go golfing? And yeah, he was definitely making a run for the border. And yeah, he had his make a run for the border kit for sure. And you know, I'm disappointed that he's involving like his sister-in-law and his brother as an excuse for the cash. He didn't say that he actually sold the truck to his brother. He said he gave him the money because he wanted to buy it. So obviously there was no paperwork or anything. This is just another excuse, and the family was covering for him.
Possibly. And she said this at the Zoom interview is when she said that was the reason why he had the cash.
So did he do the paperwork on the truck and sell it to his brother?
It was just the cash.
Yeah, exactly. So see, he probably said, "I'm going to need you guys' help just in case anything happens." And they came up with this lame story, and now they look stupid too.
So Scott was asked if he planned to flee to Mexico, and he said, quote, "I don't understand that at all, because I just want to be clear, I was never running from the police. I was always in contact with them. I'd answer most of their calls. There were times that I was very frustrated that I would not take their calls. I got my brother's driver's license to get discounted. Yeah, I was fraudulently getting a discount for playing golf. Once I was arrested, I thought that the police would soon come to realize that they made a mistake. End quote.
He has a really lame excuse for everything, doesn't he?
He does.
He should have worked on those a little bit harder.
I think he's just playing everything by ear at this point.
Who gives their driver's license to somebody for a golf discount? That's your driver's license. It's not something we're just sharing and you don't need every day. His brother needs that every day. So
I wonder if his brother was blonde.
I remember that part of the story too, and they said he was trying to disguise himself with blonde hair. Everything he did that day was obviously him trying to make a run. All these dumb excuses are just that. They're dumb. And his family should be ashamed of themselves for trying to help him.
Well, they did.
Yep, they did. Like I said, they're not even very good excuses.
Again, have an opinion.
I'm just saying, you insult our intelligence. Well, he gave his driver's license for a golf discount. No, you didn't.
I can tell this is getting you riled. So I think this is a great stopping point for part 1.
You don't want to get me started.
Apparently, I already have. So we will be continuing with part 2 next week. We hope you'll continue with us.
I'm sure they will, because you kind of left us hanging at a really good part.
And the rest is actually really good, too. So
yeah, I know it is. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for listening. We hope you have fun, take care, and don't forget to let your grimaginations run wild. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. We would just like to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send us your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @grimwitwithdimwits, X @grimwitwithdimwits, and Facebook grimwitwithdimwits. And please join us every Monday for new episodes and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
And we would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and they would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.